As the calendar turns towards Christmas, we inevitably immerse ourselves in this famous scene. The manger, the baby Jesus, Mary and Joseph, the shepherds, the Magi, all in one neat package, with maybe an ox and a sheep or two standing by. It's one of our favorite scenarios, and it's also all wrong. It's a great challenge, some say, to harmonize the birth narrative stories of Matthew and Luke. Surely the great differences between them can't be reconciled, some say. But I think they can be, and there's one small clue in Matthew's Gospel that gives us the key to how it can be done. The clue to reconciling the birth narratives of Matthew and Luke is found in a single verse in Matthew's Gospel. It's a key that not only serves to reconcile the two accounts, it also busts up the traditional nativity scene. That scene assumes that Jesus was an infant for the whole period described in Matthew and Luke. But here in Matthew chapter 2, we have a clue that this was not the case at the time Matthew is describing. If Jesus had been born just recently, why is Herod going after kids who were at least 2? The answer is that he clearly thinks this would-be Messiah he's heard about was born some time ago, as much as 2 years ago. And that leaves us with the first step of our reconciliation. These two elements of the Nativity occurred at least 2 years apart. There's no need to reconcile the events of Matthew and Luke, because they didn't happen at the same time. That seemed pretty simple, but we still have to deal with some other difficult questions. Why do Matthew and Luke show no awareness of each other's historical claims? By this I don't mean they should have been aware of each other's writings, but it seems reasonable to ask why Matthew wasn't aware of things like Luke's census, and why Luke doesn't seem to be aware of the visiting Magi. The first step to answering this question is figuring out where Matthew and Luke got their information. The answer for Luke is pretty straightforward. If he had a genuinely informed source, it was most likely Jesus' own family. You might think the same would be true of Matthew's Gospel, but I have a different idea about that. One of the most commonly accepted facts about the Gospel of Matthew, even by those who don't think Matthew authored it, is that it was authored in Antioch, Syria. It's widely believed, but it hasn't been given enough attention in regards to the birth narratives. The key question for resolution of our issue is to find a source for Matthew's story that would somehow have not been aware of the Lucan story and its elements. The opposite matter of Luke being aware of Matthew is not as much of a problem for reasons we'll discuss later. But Matthew's source would, on the one hand, know nothing about the events surrounding the birth of Jesus. They would assume, for lack of knowledge, that Jesus and his family spent those 2 years or so in Bethlehem. They would know what went on in Herod's court, but they would not, on the other hand, know anything about John the Baptist or Roman census, and would be very likely to be close at hand to the place where Matthew wrote his Gospel. Who fits this bill? The most ideal candidates for this scenario are literally under our noses every Christmas when we set up a nativity scene. I'm suggesting nothing less than that Matthew's major sources for his birth narrative were none other than these guys. Or I should say, the descendants of these guys, within their own professional order. The Magi who visited Jesus would probably have been dead by the time of Matthew's Gospel. But if we suppose that their order, or their families, were preserved, we have the first step of our solution. The second step is that the Magi are often identified as being from Syria or Arabia, in or close to where Matthew authored his Gospel. Once that's resolved, we have the beginning of understanding why there's a tension between the birth narratives of Matthew and Luke, and why, along with other reasons we'll discuss, they wrote the way they did. But we'll get more into that next time.